Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Thomas Berk. I am a neurologist and headache specialist at the NYU Langone Medical Center. And I come to you here from, as you can see over here, New York City. Um, and I am thrilled and happy to speak to you about really any topic. If you have some questions, I definitely want to focus the beginning of our talk specifically on symptoms that people with migraine will get in between migraine attacks. So we all know that many times migraine, I would say most of the time migraine is an episodic issue. Right. Migraine usually comes and goes in episodes. And it would be very simple if, migraine was kind of like a light switch. It turned on, it turned off, it came and it went. And, there really was nothing in between. And the truth is that what migraine really is something kind of different. Migraine is something that uh, most of us basically have as a predisposition our entire lives. What it means to have migraine is it means that you have the genes that predispose you to this thing that happens every so often. Because you have this predisposition, certain times a threshold is going to be reached and your brain is going to actually go into migraine mode. But even before it reaches that threshold, there is something in between and things happen and you definitely can start to have some symptoms that are in the migraine family that are maybe not necessarily as severe or as debilitating as migraine itself, but can still definitely impact you. So now we've got a bunch more people, and I just want to reintroduce myself. My name is Dr. Thomas Berk. I come to you from the NYU Langone Medical Center in New York City. And I have a bunch of people over here saying hello and hello from Austin. And what we are here to talk about today specifically is we're here to talk about migraine symptoms in between attacks. One question that I get from a lot of people is, why do I even have migraine? Like, why is this even a thing? Why why has the human body evolved and adapted to the extent that this is something that so many people have? It seems that there has to be like a reason. Many of the genes that code for migraine are coding for other things also. Sometimes they're blood vessels or painful neurotransmitters, all kinds of things. Why have migraine? Why is this even something that exists? And there are theories that abound, but one thing that many of us know is that if you have migraine, you're a little bit more sensitive to things. It can kind of be a double-edged sword, but many times if you have migraine, you can sense a lot of things better than a lot of other people. Many times you're that much more sensitive to certain smells, and sometimes that can affect you, but sometimes you're the first person that can smell something coming way down the way down the line. And maybe it's something that'll affect you, and sometimes it'll trigger a migraine, and sometimes it'll actually be there to be somewhat protective. You're the first person that smells that guy smoking down the street. Turn around the corner, go the other way. But even besides just that hypersensitivity, which is really what migraine is, it's a hypersensitivity condition, you can become really symptomatic and have some symptoms in between attacks. So the most classic example is, and many of us will remember this, if you have a predisposition for migraine, many times when you're like a little kid, you'll be that kid who can't sit backwards in a station wagon, sitting towards the back of a car or going on a boat that's swaying back and forth just causes severe nausea. Even if you don't have, a headache otherwise, and you're not necessarily in migraine mode, you're just really not feeling well. It's just very unpleasant in that kind of situation. And if that's you, if that sounds like you, it's very likely that as an adult you've developed migraines. Um, Other examples, that's probably the most classic. Other examples are people who have migraine who are more sensitive to light in general. And one of the things that I think we all notice is um, people who have migraine, when you walk out in a bright sunny day, you're probably more likely to put on a pair of sunglasses than if you didn't have that, if you didn't have migraine. Certainly, one of the things that we know is people who have more migraine, like people who have chronic migraine, they'll have a lot of these what we call interictal symptoms, these symptoms that happen in between headache attacks more frequently, and to some extent in a more severe way, more often than somebody who, let's say, gets migraine once in a blue moon. Both of them, may have some symptoms in between attacks, but if you have a high frequency of migraine, many times you'll just be that much more sensitive, and those triggers, again, may not necessarily trigger a migraine, but they can be very impactful in other ways too. One question that a lot of people ask is, I am so sensitive to these things. What can I do to make myself less sensitive to them? I want to be able to walk down the street in New York City, for instance, but there's garbage everywhere on the sidewalk and it really smells bad. What can I do? A lot of other circumstances too. And it can be difficult. One thing to always consider is that really the problem? Are you having a lot of headache attacks, a lot of migraines otherwise, that may be influencing the amount of migraines that you're the sensitivity that you have for these smells or lights? Is it really that maybe you need to start a preventive medicine because you're having such frequent headache attacks that you are that much more sensitive, even when it's not, even when you're not having your migraines? One important thing also to think about is, when exactly is it that you're that much more sensitive? Are you more sensitive right before your migraine? Maybe it's a prodrome, and many people will notice before their actual severe migraine, attack, they will have some kind of premonition, not an aura necessarily. An aura will many times come well after a prodrome starts. Prodrome can sometimes last hours, maybe even a day or so, and it can be a sense of fatigue. It can be many of these hypersensitivities. It can be a lot of these things, and maybe we should think about what you can do, if that's a sensation that's telling you a migraine is coming. Also, it's worth thinking about whether this sensitivity is happening shortly after you've kind of finished having the migraine, when you're still in the post-drome phase of migraine. The way that we're understanding migraine right now is that you have a prodrome, an aura. Some people do, some people don't. The actual attack, and then the post-drome. Post-drome can sometimes last for days, and again, it can be a sense of fatigue, unwellness, and sometimes some of these sensitivities also. There has not been a lot there haven't been many studies that have looked specifically at interventions in people who are sensitive in general to, let's say, smells or sounds or lights, separate from their headache attacks, and whether certain interventions can help. One thing that we definitely know is, if, like I was saying before, we can get the frequency of headache down many times, that can improve the sensitivities that you're having to these, to many of these triggers also. Um, One thing that we've discovered not too long ago is precisely what is it in, let's say, light. What exactly is it even in smells, to an extent, that really is the trigger? In light, we know that there's a very well-known migraine researcher in Beth Israel named Rami Burstein. And what he's spent years doing is trying to figure out precisely what frequencies of light, what spectrum of light, what is it in it that makes light so much more painful for people who have migraine. And to a lesser extent, even after a concussion, many people, especially if they've had a predisposition for migraine before and have had a concussion, what is it in the light that's bothering you? He's broken light down into basically the red, blue, and green spectrums of light. And one of the things that he's seen is that it's really the blue part of light, which a lot of people are familiar with because they say, oh, turn the blue light down right before you go to sleep. It's in sunlight, and it is what basically hits the back of your eye and sends a message to the pineal gland and the hypothalamus to tell those parts of the brain, is it daytime, is it nighttime? That blue spectrum of light can be very irritating in people who have migraine. The red, iffy, and the green part of it can actually be very calming. And for that reason, there are people who won't necessarily use your regular standard sunglasses when you go outside. There are a bunch of companies that will specifically market, sunglasses that block blue light for people who have migraine. Or sometimes you can have, any kind of even relatively cheap version of the same thing. You can find, very similar style, glasses, even relatively cheaply on Amazon and other places. And, they can be sometimes a relatively cheap investment, and it can make a huge difference with regards to like what you can tolerate. So I'll just reintroduce myself again because I see we have even more people. So my name is Thomas Berk. I am a neurologist and headache specialist at the NYU Langone Medical Center, and I'm here to talk to all of you about headache symptoms that occur in between headache attacks. I am very happy to take any questions you might have. And, I'm sure that everybody has different experiences with regards to what it is that they're sensitive to, even when you don't have the migraine. Just to kind of summarize what I've been saying beforehand, migraine classically is described as an episodic phenomenon. It comes and it goes, and when it's there, very frequently it's just there, and when it's gone, well, it's not really that gone. Even though it's episodic, many times those sensitivities or sometimes triggers will still exist. And the best way that we have to understand it, again, summarizing, is to realize that migraine, for the most part, is a hypersensitivity issue. You're more sensitive in general to lights, you're more sensitive in general to sounds, you're more sensitive in general to smells, and for that reason, you are just that much more likely to be symptomatic during your headache attacks.